Hello, hello. I gotta turn this camera around. When am I gonna learn? I'm so glad you're here with me today. Welcome to my bestie life. I'm glad we have these few moments together so I can remind you how valid you are, how your feelings are important, and I am so glad to be spending Sunday morning with you. I repinked my hair. I was going for that baby pink, but got a little carried away, but that's cool. Able to post our last live. I had a total glitch. Sometimes Instagram just has glitches. Oh, here we go. Just like we do. So, hello.
Good morning.
So I was just saying I didn't post our last live. We had a little bit of an Instagram glitch, but
Yeah.
we are here back as always, dependable every Sunday morning. And if you are joining us on Instagram, put a heart. Tell me what your favorite vegetable is if you have one. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or listening on Spotify later, comment with your favorite vegetable. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you comment. The heart button, I hear that helps. That's awesome. It just feeds the almighty algorithm so that we can have more besties join us on our Sunday morning party.
That's
How are you doing
right.
today?
I'm good. We were kind of chatting earlier that I feel like I'm in a sci-fi movie right now because all the cottonwood is just like floating in such a weird way. It's been really crazy, and it's either getting in my mouth or my nose or stuffing me
Yeah,
up.
if you're not in the lower mainland, it really looks just like tiny bits of cotton balls, just floating and the updraft. It really looks like you're on a magical world. It's very ethereal, and it will screw up your sinuses like you wouldn't believe.
It will. But it's been a good weekend. Steph is on here, and I went and saw her in her spa, and she took care of me yesterday, so that was really fun. And
Right.
I was noticing that I was just like, like you and I, we color our own hair, we do our own stuff, and I realized that I need a little bit more time, like maybe not having somebody rip my hair out, but next time, like just really go and spend that time and have that time for me. So
Mm, yeah. Book in
yeah.
that time for yourself. Um, Last week, we were talking a little bit about criticism and the criticism that sticks versus the silly criticism. And
Hmm.
when something comes to your awareness, you start to see it just everywhere, or if that the universe or God or whatever you want to call it is just like, let's just reinforce this lesson we just learned. And it was actually really fun. So I have been cleaning out, doing my pandemic spring cleaning, and we had these Harry Potter books. My kid, unfortunately, I loved Harry Potter. She's not into it at all. She's into anime. I know, right?
It's
Your kids are not going to like the
It's
same thing.
heartbreaking, isn't it? When we love the things, we're like, we want you to love this too, and they're just like, meh, next.
No. So I listed them on Marketplace. It was just like I put my stuff out there, and boom, I had like a page long of comments on this post. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I'm just trying to clean my house. It was about, J.K. Rowling and her being evil. And then it was about Harry Potter being evil. And there were all these arguments in the comments. And I was like, you know what? This is just exactly what we were talking about. It doesn't matter what you do, how innocuous it is, or like how non-threatening it is. Somebody probably will find it threatening or have an opinion and will be so willing to share it with you.
Willing is a nice word for it. Yeah. Yep.
And then I had another one where I was doing a post on trauma in childhood, and somebody just posted underneath, "This is bullshit." And I was like, well, excellent point, sir. It is bullshit that children experience trauma. But it just goes to show you the insults that come when they feel ridiculous and when they don't. When they feel ridiculous, you're
Mm.
not identifying with them. You see them for what they are. And when we do identify them, they just really stick. But I wanted to circle back on that after our last
I know
last
it,
chat.
it's funny once you start seeing things, you can't really unring that bell.
Right.
Like, and it's weird because then you start, and I guess maybe it's the law of attraction too. Like when you're focused on something, when you're working on something, that's when you start noticing it popping up everywhere in your life, and you're like, oh, oh, oh. And instead of seeing these, I think that we start to see them as opportunities to practice what we're the habits that we are trying. And so it kind of really changes, right? And we talk a lot about our mindset and our perception is that instead of being afraid of those certain situations or afraid that somebody's going to make a comment, it's like, ooh, here are some muscles I get to flex and I get to try and I get to respond in a way that honors me. And this isn't about proving somebody wrong. This is about standing within your truth and being okay with that and responding in kindness. And I think that people who put out hateful messages and comments and stuff like that, they're expecting attention because they're poking the bear, right? And I think that where we win is when we respond in kindness and understanding. And it's hard. I was just commenting to my husband this morning. I was like, sometimes I'm so angry. I'm so mad because he had to dial it down. He's like, he pulled me aside. He's like, babe, you're kind of yelling. Sunday's not for yelling. You gotta dial it down. And it was just that little in my face, right? Where I was just like, oh, right, right. Why am I so mad right now? And so I just had to kind of like shake that off and how it infiltrates. And it's like really, really kind of dialing back into that moment. So that was quite funny this morning. I needed that reminder. Sunday's not for yelling, you guys. It's not for yelling.
That's so funny. But yeah, like getting out there and putting your stuff out there, that's like, or setting the intention to change. Because really that's what we really wanted to talk about. Setting the
Yep.
intention to change or setting the intention to do something different, putting yourself
So
out there.
how do you know when you need to change? How do you know?
That is an excellent question, because really, if you really want to change, that comes with like it starts inside first, right?
Right.
Not wanting to
That
put
awareness.
up. You know, actually, it's really interesting you were talking about yelling earlier, because often my biggest impetus to change is anger. And I think as women, we are taught to fear anger, but I think anger is just telling us we need to change.
Do you know it's so frustrating? And I'm glad that you brought this up because I think that my biggest motivator, and this is where I feel it's wrong. My biggest motivator is when I am so pissed off.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I've had enough. And so and really, you know, sitting there and going, so when things are going along tickety boo and everything's good, how do I keep up that kind of fire, that motion? Because I don't want to be angry all the time in order to affect change. But why is it that angry? And it's almost like, akin to, I feel humiliated, or you know, where it's like that moment where I'm like, I'm going to show you. And so, and I don't know who the you is that I'm trying to show, but I noticed that for myself. Like I have the biggest fire under my butt when I'm mad. And so, and it's kind of dialing that back and saying, how do I leverage and understand that maybe that to continue change, like, why do I let it get to the point where I'm pissed off? Like, I don't want to get to the point where I'm pissed off in order to change. And so I need to change that.
There's a couple things that I'm hearing and curious about. The first thing is our relationship with anger. Why is it a problem? Because anger is a universal emotion. And I think particularly as women, particularly as spiritual people, we talk ourselves out of feeling angry because it's considered as being wrong or bad. But I think there's a reason that every culture, every person on this earth has felt angry. It's there for a purpose. So it's, yeah. So
well,
I don't think
you hear all of these things like hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Do you know what I mean? I think that we get it's like a meme, right? Is like, who wants to deal with an angry woman? Because it is very different. I think that men are allowed a little bit more volume in their voice when they're speaking. And I think that throughout my life, is that I've had to moderate my anger. And unfortunately, when I'm really mad, I cry, which is just a
Me too.
stupid physiological side effect of me getting, when I'm really mad, I cry, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And so people are like, "Oh, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Don't touch me. I'm really mad right now." So, and it's just one of those things where you're right. It just, like, I mean, and that is the precipice to feeling like you're on the brink of something and you just need to, like you've had enough. But how do we not get to that point though? Why do we have to get there in order to start that change, to move that change? And then, because for me, the anger is always, I've had enough. And
Yes. Yes, that's it there. It's what you no longer willing to tolerate. And that is the impetus to change. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from like deep fury, but I don't want to condemn anger, and I don't want to shy away from it, which is what we have been conditioned and
but
taught
I
to
don't
do.
think we know what safe anger looks like, right? I think that a lot of media and television and everything is that I tend to shy away from people who are angry because I don't know if I'm physically safe.
Yes. And that is what the target of the anger. So the target of the anger is what you're no longer going to tolerate. It's not necessarily a specific individual. And that, I think, there is the difference between productive anger and unproductive anger. When we are
Mhm.
suffering and we say, it is your fault, you need to fix this so that I feel better, we have lost all power, lost all control. But when we are angry at like, something and then we're like, I want to change this, then we have power, and then the anger becomes productive anger because it fuels us to no longer tolerate things that are either inappropriate or are harmful or just aren't serving us anymore.
And I think too, and I think many of us have been in that little circle, right? Of being like, I really want to change. Nothing happens. I really want to change. I can see it. I can see it. I really want to change. And it's there, but what is the next step? And because sometimes when we feel like there's change, it's so great. It's so far away from where we are right now that it's extremely overwhelming. And I think it's like, just kind of, I see it like, you're sitting in your car and you're trying to get on the highway and everybody's going really, really fast. And you're just like, "Oh, okay, no, okay, I'll wait. Next time. Okay, the next time. And so you can feel that, because I think that in order to really have change fully, we know that we have to let go of things and that things
Um,
will actually change, right? The whole point of changing is that things will be different. And I think if we have this idea in our head that everything can stay the same and we can change, I think that we need to manage our expectations when it comes to what is coming. And the scary part is that sometimes we don't know what that change is going to bring about, because when we change and shift, there's a filtering, right, of things. We're gonna lose people in our lives. You're gonna lose kind of different things that you did before. For me and what I do, sometimes it's like foods, traditions of things that always were, that you always did, that you no longer do, because you're changing into something, running towards something. And I think that one of the things that I did not expect, when I went on a wellness journey, was to lose people.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was really, it was shocking, actually. And but looking back at it now, it's totally understandable that when we start seeking out things, and right, because and especially, like, I hear it a lot, so in the workshops and stuff like that, of that we are afraid to tell people about what we are doing, and where we're headed, because we're going to get a pushback from people. I don't want you to change because that means that you're not going to be the same to me.
Yeah. And when you follow that train of thought, or train of thought, you get to the why is that? Why is that? Why am I losing this specific person? Why is this relationship no longer happening? And when you get to the why, the loss of it seems like reasonable. It's a reasonable loss, because those are the people that either your change is personally threatening to them or a mirror to them. Actually, even both end up being a mirror, right?
And that can be really hard when it's family members, and even simply that, really we teach people how to treat us, and it's really about, and that's scary. That is super scary, because it is really about kind of standing up and saying to somebody your truth, and then having them, when we're talking about anger, that anger come back at you. And
yeah. And I think that's about putting yourself first, right? Like, because it's putting your oxygen mask on, really, before you put the other person's mask on. It's putting your needs first and then the other person. Because if you're living a life to please other people, you're not living your life.
Oh, preach, sister. Oh my goodness. We were talking about that. That is one of the things of self-love, is putting your well-being before the needs of other people. Like, that is what, dialing back to self-love, and we were talking about that all week, is what does self-love look like to you? And that is where we change, right? And it can be something that starts really, really small, right? It's in that daily thing. Like, we don't have to all of a sudden be this completely different person. That takes really small steps to affect change. And change doesn't have to be bad. Like, and this is where it's, and again, we don't have, like, I remind myself, like, I don't need to get to the point where I've had enough before that I can take those steps for changing and constantly changing, because we're always changing and growing.
Yeah. Daniel put in a question in the comments. I think I could use more anger in my life, but it's not my default emotion. How can I summon a healthy anger when needed? I don't know if it's so much as summoning as in getting in touch with what's already there and giving yourself permission to feel what you're already feeling.
You know what it makes me think of is and I think that anger and tension and pent-up frustration, they're all kind of balled into one, is to be able to go to a place outside and just scream your head off and just let it out. And that's one physical way to kind of release. So I think that it's less about summoning and more about releasing that pressure, that, you've seen it in movies, or like the scream into the pillow, wherever that it's safe. And I think that a lot of times anger can be used a lot vocally because it's loud, right? When people who are angry, they yell and they do that. And I think that consciously going out and releasing that sound and that energy into the world, it will release from your body. And I think that might be a really good physical way to release your frustrations and everything that you might have pent up.
That's in the body. I want to circle back to that because I think that is a fundamental point in the conversation about anger. But also, I think opening it up into giving ourselves permission to feel angry. So many of us are conditioned that it is inappropriate.
That's not okay. Yeah.
On how we deal with children with anger, especially when we were children, or if you had an older parent with an older parenting style, your anger probably from 7 and under was deemed inappropriate, was not validated, and was dismissed or belittled. So when we have that conditioning with anger, like especially with older style parents, or especially as women, we are conditioned that anger is wrong or anger is bad. And particularly if you're on like a light worker kind of path, or if you're like, I just want to live my best life, your subconscious will be, I don't want to be bad. I don't want to be good. So it shut down. I want to be good. I want to be a good person. So it shuts down that anger right away. And then it manifests in your body. It will manifest in your jaw, in your shoulders, lower back. And actually your IT band, which is like butt hip area. We carry a lot of emotions there. So there's some breath work that I do with clients, like one specific exercise, which I call, it'll give you healed girl, hot girl arms in the summer. But, and I actually had this vetted with a psychiatrist and a therapist as well as to why this works. I'll actually, when I post this, I'll put the link to that YouTube video below on that exercise, just if you're curious. But really what it is like you're breathing in and out through the teeth. And you don't want to think about what it is that's making you angry. You're just literally getting that feeling out of the body, because we can store it in our muscles. Animals, when they are threatened, they'll either feel angry and attack, or they'll retreat and they'll shake. But humans, we just don't have a way of getting rid of it. So it literally stays in your body. So you're clenching that jaw and you're like, oh.
And it's also about that addressing it in the moment too. I think that one of the biggest problems that we have is we fester. And the more that we think about something and we don't address it, or at least it's one of my problems where I hold on. And the more I think about it, the more mad that I get, instead of like just addressing it right then. And
so why are you holding on to it? Like what causes us? Like, you're not, clearly Allie's not the only person that holds on to anger. What causes us to hold on to it? Is it that we feel we don't, it won't be heard, or that it's inappropriate?
I think it's more that it's that I don't respond in truth. I think that I just kind of go, oh, okay. And then I think about it later, and then I'm like, oh, I should have said this. And then it was like, hey, I really didn't like that. And I think that I don't allow myself the time before I respond. I think that I personally, me, is that I'm so conditioned to be like, polite and not rock the boat and not do this, that actually going, you know what, I'm not okay with that. I don't appreciate that comment, because there's going to be an exchange. And I think that for me, it's because I'm scared of that person potentially being confrontational and rejecting me. And so
that's it there, the fear of rejection.
Yeah. And
what's happening there is you're rejecting a part of yourself. You're rejecting your own truth in order to not be rejected by the other person. There's also the flip side of that too. If you've coming out of a toxic relationship, or if you've had toxic parents, your response to anger will be different. Like for me, just even small anger would set me off physiologically. Like my body I would jump, or I'd want to hide, or my pupils would dilate and my breath would go. And it has nothing necessarily to do with that moment. My body is just like, okay, we're getting ready to run, because we don't know. We've seen this kind of stuff before. Let's get ready to go.
Yeah. And like that adrenaline, I don't know about you, but like I carry it in my chest for days. And I think that it's that whole thing, what you're talking about, like with animals and stuff, how they shake. And that's why my suggestion is like, go howl at the moon and like get it out of your body, because it doesn't belong there anymore. And I think releasing it, and it is about feeling our feelings, right? We've talked about this before. Instead of medicating with food or alcohol or self-harm or whatever to deal with our emotions, is releasing the emotion when it's happening or shortly after. Because the only people who suffer and pay the price is us. It's our bodies that have to carry that around. And then for me, it will come out at my family, right? And they're just like, whoa, what's going on? There's no yelling on Sundays, right? Like, it's just like, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's no yelling on Sundays. So, and it's making sure that anger is not misdirected at people who don't deserve it too, because I think we've all been on that receiving end of that too, right?
And probably the other. We've been on both ends of that coin.
Right. Of just being like, whoa, where is this coming from? And I think that we do need to get better, and we need to change. and get better at feeling our feelings, and having that as a safe space. And I think that you're right. We've been told our whole lives, don't cry, don't yell, don't do this. And I see that in my 7-year-old, right, is that he gets so mad. And, as parents, that we're just trying to be like, okay, you can't kick things. We need to redirect and I say to him all the time, it's not that you can't be mad. You just can't destroy things, and you can't hit people, and you can't yell at people who, it's not their fault. And so we're starting with our kids. And sometimes I forget to give myself that permission too, right?
Yes, and what a good mom you are, especially with, like, with our male children. We that anger can feel so scary because you can see the intensity, and all children have really intense emotions. But to allow space for it without shutting him down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as parents, this is like our generation and the millennial generation and Gen Z, we are the first ones to do this, to not either shut down or fuel our son's anger and have appropriate space for it. Yeah, it takes more energy to be angry than to be okay with why something is said to you. It takes more energy to be angry. I don't know. I think I think to be okay with how and why something is said to you is always the high road, which I think is what you're getting at here. But it's not a default reaction to many of us because we've never had it taught to us, or we just don't know how to navigate that yet.
It's also, it ties into what we were talking about last week, though, is like feedback versus criticism. I think that I think that we can change how we feel about stuff in that, right? We're using that, well, that's ridiculous. And I think being able to move on from that, I think that, identifying maybe I am too angry, and maybe I want to change that. And so then it's weeding out, so what deserves my anger, and what deserves well, that's ridiculous. And I think that looking at what is setting that off, and where is that coming from. And I think that when we again back up and go to root causes, and it could be simply because I haven't gone and howled at the moon and gotten that tension out of my body because I was mad about XYZ 3 weeks ago, and I haven't let it go. And it comes out, and it always comes back. And I think that where the change looks for, and I think that this is kind of what they were getting at, is identifying what is worth that anger and what's not, which is just like, well, that's ridiculous, and I'm going to move on. And not let things get to you. And I think that things pile up, right? And that's when we don't address things, they pile up. And that's why for some of us we eat, right? Is that, and it's not about that particular moment, but it's about the fact that it's been building, and that pressure that we have, and it has to get out somehow. And so dialing it back to feeling our feelings and getting out there, and I don't know, I'm going to start shaking my body out, and the neighbors are going to think I'm insane. So
yeah, and then allowing our brains to associate what the payoff is. There are times where the payoff for saying that anger, you want that because you need to change that situation, versus the payoff of, if I explode in this way, it's actually going to harm this relationship. So there's not a payoff there. Okay, so that's where I dial back. I think the payoff is the key for hacking our brains.
It's everything. Having a reward for things. We are hardwired that we want to do things that feel good, that we get whatever a treat might be for you, is that this isn't about suffrage. There's no payout for suffering, with all the, with all food stuff. Like, don't eat shit you don't like. There's no point. Just, okay, so kale's good for you. Big deal. If you hate it, so you're miserable, so you're going to eat kale. Like, there's no payoff on that on your end, because if we don't feel like we have a payoff, we believe that. And what we tell ourselves is 100% the truth of what we're going to believe. And so again, like that self-love of being able to talk to ourselves nicely, to put ourselves first, we're going to believe the things we tell ourselves.
Yes, 100%. We always do. So if we circle back to change, If you're crying because you're eating this really shitty bag of kale, if you're crying into your bag of kale because you haven't seen the payoff yet, you're not going to do that twice. And that is the trick when it comes to sticking with change over the long term, is that there's that little gap. And I think we talked about this a few episodes earlier, and how like we make these big changes either in finance or in business or in
Mm-hmm.
our bodies. And then there's that little break before we see the payoff. And this is the cognitive dissonance of change, where we have two things that we see as true happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So if I give you the example of wanting to stop smoking, you have the one truth of smoking is bad for my health, and the other truth, I smoke cigarettes. So you have these two things happening at the same time, which makes us feel physically uncomfortable. Our brain is like, I'm going to explode now. And the same thing is happening when we are going to lose weight or when we are starting a business. Like if you're going to lose weight, you're like, I'm going to lose weight. And then I'm crying into my bag of kale and I don't see the payoff yet. And then that feels very, very uncomfortable. And this is the tipping point. This is the
Mm-hmm.
part where we want to turn around and be like, fuck kale, I'm eating my bag of chips instead, because we have yet to see the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the part where it is most difficult to change. And when we are in that moment, part of it is an act of faith, and part of it is borrowing other people's truth for
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And also the one thing that we know is that when we decide to make that change, and we have changed our lifestyle, our business, ourselves, that is not a permanent state unless you garden. You make sure that you are tending your garden when it comes to that, because we have old pathways that we will leap back. And I think that and this has happened many times where it's like, well, I didn't think I'd get back here again. How did I get back here again? And it's like, well, because we need to work at this, and sometimes, and change is not permanent. It is something that we have to work at if we want that change to stick. And for me, it was like, okay, so I need to track my food for the rest of my life. Okay, so how do I feel about that? And I had to kind of like be like, well, that kind of sucks, but yet at the same time to have a roadmap so that I have a guide to go to where I need to go in order to keep that change. Because when I'm not paying attention, I do back up, and I'm back in a place where I didn't want to be. And then it's like, how do I turn this around and go in the direction that I wanted to? And again, it's dialing it back to really small steps, because I can't leap from here to here. I can't go back to where I was, 7 months ago, because there has been so much time within that. And it is holding on to the things that you like about that change, and they easily fall away because life happens. Life totally happens. We have a left curve that comes in, and it starts right now, even like, and forgiving those past mistakes, like even if it was a minute ago, whatever, is that we can always turn and be like, okay, right now.
Yeah, and change the conversation of all or nothing, one and done. We got to normalize maintenance. We normalize maintenance when we brush our teeth. We normalize maintenance when we cut our hair or when we wax our legs. We know that hair is coming back, and you could just be like, I'm not going to wax my legs. And that's fine in that kind of context. But when it comes to brushing your teeth, if I'm just like, I brushed my teeth once and I'm done, my husband's being like, oh, no, 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 no. No, you're going to go back and brush your teeth again. But we need to normalize maintenance in other areas of life, like mental health, like our physical health. And that is the key of changing, normalizing that maintenance and being like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, just like brushing your teeth all the time isn't that big of a deal. Normalizing that maintenance of physical health, normalizing that maintenance of mental health, I think is a key to just really being happy.
Yeah, and happiness comes with sadness and anger. We can't be and again, this is like, it's not an all or nothing, and this is where the ebb and the flow comes from. And me, is that I don't believe in perfect. I don't think that perfect is a word that is even possible, because there's an end, there's a ceiling, and we are constantly changing and growing. And I think that again, looking at change in a positive light, that we don't have to get to that breaking point before we change, is that we are allowed to give permission. Like we've used this word before, is like giving ourselves permission to change before our breaking point, before we're mad, before all of these things. And well, why are you doing this, right? Because we're always feeling like somebody's going to challenge us. Well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to stop eating meat? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to lose weight? You're fine the way you are. And it's like, yes, I am fine the way that I am. But seeking out wellness, or seeking out help, or bettering ourselves mentally, physically, all of these things, or asking for help, it's never, it isn't about because we're lacking in something. Is more that we're seeking something. Is that this is about what we gain and not about what we're losing, right? And so that moving forward, and if you, the world is such a big place and there's so many things to learn. Why would you stop?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfection robs joy. Like if you get there, let's say you get there, perfection robs joy. If you get there, you're like, I'm perfect now. Well,
now what?
But when we enjoy the journey, it's like going hiking with preteens. They're like, how long are we going to do this? What's the time limit on this? Versus like allowing them to be frustrated and then looking at the environment and enjoying the day rather than just getting to the end of that hike. That's the same thing with any journey. Like we want to enjoy the experience rather than just focus on the end, and then we're done.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's the wonderful thing about goals, is that once you hit that goal, then you make another one, right? And that's the thing, though, is that and you everyone knows that person who's always doing something, who's always like in the thick of things and doing things, and it's just like sometimes we can feel that that's overwhelming, but for them, they've gotten into that rhythm of doing those things, and they're seekers, right? They are seekers of life, and they go and they do things, and they're actually experiencing life. And the best part is that they're unafraid to fail. And I think that the thing about life is like it's all the learning. If we were only good at stuff, that would be terrible. Like it would be terrible. We'd have no character. We'd be so egocentric. It would be, oh, we're just perfect at everything. We're great. We get everything we ever want. And it is that journey. It is the fighting. It's the figuring out what works and what doesn't work. That's the fun of it. That's the thick of it. That's where we and right is that sometimes with change, it's uncomfortable.
Almost always. And I think when we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, we are unstoppable.
Yes. It's like I was telling my son all the time, you need to get better at losing. Like, you've got to be a better loser.
And we need to normalize losing. I heard this one parent say that they had their parent ask, how did you fail today? To switch the narrative of like, are you trying things unsuccessfully? That's great. How did you fail today? What did you learn from that? Rather than, did you get an A? Are you perfect?
Yeah. The one thing I have to say, so my brother is probably one of the best losers that I've ever come across. He will try everything and anything. And I try to cuddle him up with my son. Like, video games is a prime example. Like, he's just laughing his ass off. He thinks that this is the funniest thing, and he's in the back of the pack. And he's just enjoying the whole process of it, right? When you talk about that hike, I'm like, oh, when is it going to be over? Look around, open your eyes, enjoy the moment that you're in right now. And so, and I think that a lot of this life is about winning or losing. And again, it is not black or white. This isn't all or nothing. And I think that some of our biggest learnings can be from, being terrible at something and having a great attitude about it and doing it anyway, because maybe being terrible at something so your buddy can be awesome at it, just to show up with them. Like, there's all different roles that we get to play, and it's not at the front or the end all the time. And there's many different,
the wonder of life. How does this work? What is this like? Oh, and the really amazing thing is, when we fail at one thing, we bring that knowledge into a different discipline. So if you're willing to, if you're
right? I
going to.
think that is where the habit comes into, is that you've got two different types of people where, bury their head in the sand and be like, I don't want anyone to see me, I failed at that, I suck, whatever. And then there's somebody that was like, okay, so I'm gonna, looking back at that and kind of being like, so what did I learn from that? Okay, well, I didn't do that well and that well, but there was this and this. And I think and again, it's being able to break it down and take a look. And so you can drag that into something else and be like, hey, I tried this and this is what happened to me. And it could just simply even be that, that you can help somebody else out in a different situation, and be a buddy and be like, yeah, I was terrible at that too.
And if you're having your turtle shell moment, which is often what I think about, like when I want to hide in my
Yeah.
sweater, we need to know why that is. Like, are you
Mhm.
feeling unsafe? So create safety around failing, of being like, you're not failing anyone. You're just don't know enough how to do this one thing yet. And then creating that safety of like, it's okay to screw up. It's okay to fuck up. That's part of the human experience, actually.
And also know that there's always going to be somebody that's going to be better than you at something. And so that just knowing that fact gives you the space in the room. You don't have to be the best of the best of the best. You still get to do all of it. All of it. Totally give you permission. You are allowed to enter the race, into the life, into everything. You get to do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing running taught me more than anything, was that there was no way I was going to win the marathon. I don't join the marathon to win the
Like, why
marathon.
don't so many people do it if there's only one winner, right?
Yeah, you don't do that. You do it for the experience. You do it for the training. You do it for the mental discipline. You do it for the joy of doing it, and you do it for the bragging rights. Let's be real. And even just to yourself of like, I did this.
Did that. Yeah. I did it. And I think that, and when we kind of remove the competition out of everything, and then it also gives you that room to celebrate the people who are better than you at it too, that you're allowed to do that, yet you're still allowed to cheer on other people who are being successful at, and right. And then we remove that. We talked about anger, of like, why does that make you mad that somebody is better than you at something that might be just a natural talent that they have, or they've worked really hard for that. And it gives you a sense of peace, right? And we talked about making peace with where we're at. And I think that it takes a lot of energy to feel resentful and bitter at other people who have things that you don't. And it does take a real shift in your mind to change that perception. But what a sense of calm, right? We don't have to carry all of that with us anymore, is that we can still do this thing and cheer on other people, and that's okay.
And not have our value be conditional.
Yes,
Your value
absolutely.
is never conditional.
I love it. I love it.
Well, our conversation on change kind of took a beautiful walk in the woods, in that we went through all these different ways, but I think they were all a part of how we change.
It's such a big thing, because change is it's these microseconds, these moments that we have, and every minute, every day, every week, every year, we are the gatekeepers of our lives, and we're the people who get to choose how we show up in the world. There's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at us that we cannot control, and so if we only had to look at the things that we have to control, that we can affect change with, I think we'd be a lot less stressed out, and feel a little bit more confident and joyful in that. And I think that too is feeling confident enough to make those changes. Because you are going to get pushback from people who don't want you to change.
You get pushback from yourself of wanting to keep things the same.
We are the biggest people who push back. Just also simply because we are worried what other people will think.
Because our value is unconditional.
We're going to post that. That's going to be the mantra written in lipstick.
My value is unconditional. Say it with me.
Yeah. And Pat's putting in, live in the here and the now moment. Yes. Yeah,
Mm.
put away all that stuff. And if you were looking for change, if you were looking to change, don't wait. You can change right now, and it starts really, really simply, right? Um, it's about taking that small step, and what's easy, that is what is in front of you.
It's one choice, then another, then another, then another. Um, Thanks, guys, for sticking with us this Sunday morning. It's always beautiful to spend time with you. If we haven't formally met before, my name is AJ. I'm a trauma and anxiety coach. Allie is a coach with Weight Watchers, and you can catch her group coaching sessions if you are a part of Weight Watchers. She's in the BC region. And if you are watching this later on YouTube or Facebook or Spotify or Google Podcasts, just hit the like, make a comment if there's a space for that. It just boosts the almighty algorithm. Yeah, so have an amazing rest of your weekend and make a choice.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, we love you both too.